this, a lot of pressure on this exhibit now with all of the fine details and artfully arranged objects. So, when in a few minutes, I guess we'll begin the first tour and we'll see if it all works out. At the end of the day, there's only two choices and one who's wrong, so let's see if we've got the right one. Okay, if you'd like to begin, we'll begin more than one.
And anybody that doesn't have tour, we have some obsolete snacks.
I want a tour.
We line when to come.
I came all the way here to tour.
We got to go the long way around.
All right then.
Malcolm, is it okay if I record a bit?
Yeah.
Wow, look at all this. Oh,
This is part of the timeline of the museum. This is the Desert Archaic time period, then the Paiute camp, coming to mining, ranching, exploration, farming, coming to early settlements in Las Vegas, going around to the riverboats on the Colorado River, a little bit more about mining, an early mock-up of a temporary camp on Las Vegas Creek for land auction.
wow.
Fanny's dress shop, a reproduction of the Fanny's dress shop, some really gaming machines, and ending up with the Heritage Gallery.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So this is Obsolete Objects, and the dictionary defined obsolete as no longer in use or misused or neglected. Doesn't mean they're not workable, but just something else has come to replace them. And one thing we decided to do with this exhibit is to highlight one aspect of Las Vegas we haven't seen before, and it's right over here at the start. Some of the early lumber technology. And we wanted to start off with the logging information because logging was just as important as the railroads or mining or ranching. And the lumber from Kyle Canyon and Las Vegas Canyon, Clark Canyon, helped provide the lumber for the ranches and farms and the railroads and the mines, especially the mining communities. We start with saws because lumbermen had a tradition of resistance to modernization, and this exhibit pretty much talks about what happens during the processes of modernization. From the lumber industry, we go over to the trade tools of the trades. We begin with objects that were around during the 54-hour work week in the 1900s. In 1916, you got to work about 48 hours a day. 1938, got to work about 44 hours. 1940, we got to a 40-hour work week. And the first minimum rate of 25 cents an hour. Of course, the trades, the unions, had a much bigger scale. Some were making as much as $1.25 an hour. Let's see if we're going to do a little audio-visual presentation for our business machines here. But we gotta see if the technology will work. Okay. Here we go. So much for ease.
How many times you have to put in the password? That's what I want to know.
Business communications technology in the first half of the 20th century. Wax cylinder recording was used from 1907 to 1947 until newer manufacturing and material advances provided solutions that were even more convenient and easier to use. So when the Gen Zer tells you that is so last century, this is what they're talking about. But because of the popularity and success of these machines, Dictaphone became a generic term 40 years ago, in the 80s, digital recording arrived and provided even more convenient means. It is now the medium of choice for audio recording, editing, and exporting.
It just doesn't happen to be as quickly accessible as the early machines. But 1907 is when Dictaphone came around. This machine is from 1909, and it's a mechanical machine, pre-electricity. By the 1930s, we had electrical devices being made by the Dictaphone company. This is the dictating machine. You speak into the horn. The sound would be recorded on the wax cylinder. The wax cylinder would then be taken to the transcribing machine, where the sound would play back the cylinder, moving that sound through the air tubes to get a stereo headset, so you can hear the speech in both ears. After the cylinder was listened to and typed up and whatever else, it could be reused by going over to the shaving machine, which would shave and smooth the wax cylinder so that it could be reused. And the cylinders could be reused up to 200 times, and each cylinder could hold about 1,200 words, which is a pretty good amount. The machines were used from 1907 through the 1950s, when different technology replaced them. But this machine was used at the basic magnesium industries, so it was well after 40s, well past the war years. And these were donated by the Clark County School District in the 60s to the museum. So they were used in secretarial training and typing training and business school training in the Clark County school system for some time.
So, excuse me, what makes that go round and round? Is there a little number you have to do?
Well, there's it would be spring wound mechanism. The other ones have electricity. We can't see the cords.
Okay, I get that. But this one, when you said, I thought maybe someone had to do this.
No,
Make it go, no,
it's all mechanical. Some very similar to the mechanisms of a gramophone machine.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And one of the problems with it is if you're dictating and you make a mistake, you have to make a small notation on the thematic diagram at the here, saying ignore this spot from this to this point. Because when you transcribe, you can't go back and erase it like you can the digital recorder. So these were state of the art until the early 1960s. And this is, to ask yourself, what's on your business desk is going to be there in 70 years from now. You know, possibly nothing in the same way as we know it is today. And behind us, we have just a transit. This talks about transitions, and it's a transition of manufacturing and a transition of use, and a transition of expectation. We're moving from the heavy field, lighter field machinery, to after the war years, we had a little bit more leisure time, and then the patio culture in the early 50s and 60s, and then the interest in the attractive looking garden. Mm-hmm. The highlight of this is probably the stamped chair to talk about change. It was very popular from the early 30s until the 50s, when new techniques and new manufacturing processes gave people lighter chairs, more portable chairs, chairs that didn't rust as easily. New materials, right now they're making these in cast iron, but they're also casting them in resin, space-age polymers. And in the 30s, there was probably 20 manufacturers making this type of chair. And today, there's 40 or 50 companies. There's more people making them now than they're making them during the 30s, 40s, or 50s. The other thing, a lot of you might ask, how come garden trowels are obsolete? If you're gardening, you probably have one. Well, what became obsolete was the manufacturing process. These are solid metal with, this one has a wooden handle and a wooden ferrule. This other one is solid stamped metal. Today, we have the same thing, but it's made out of plastic. Now, in 1940s, 1950s, nobody would think of using this in the garden. But it's lighter, the materials cost less, it's less, doesn't weigh as much, so it's easier to transport. So cost takes the precedence over the earlier techniques.
Actually, you mean quality, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll say it's not quality. Behind us, we're talking about change during the, on the home front, I guess you might say. Washing, ironing, vacuuming and cooking, and then repeating the process. But it's, these are, they're called them agitators, which is what they are. This is the business end of the agitator with the baffles, and it looks an awful lot like the agitator on the washing machine right now. And everything went from a manual process of cleaning the clothes to an automatic once the electricity came to the nation throughout the country in the late 40s. On the irons, we have a sad iron. This pattern of sad iron was patented in what did it say?
1860?
1860. This one right here. The sad irons, or these type of irons, have been around for quite some time. But Thomas Loring decided to patent it, and because of that, this shape became his patented design. And when made a similar iron, they became known as common style sad irons. The sad iron is from a word that means heavy, solid. 400 years ago, sad meant heavy and solid. 200 years after that, the word sayed changed to sad, and sad iron became the generic name. Around the 1870s, Mary Potts decided that if she created a detachable handle for the iron, then instead of the iron the handle getting hot on the stove with the iron and having to use towels or cloths to hold the iron, you could just hold the base, and when the iron cooled off, you could switch out the handle for a hot iron and put the cold iron back on the stove. You can see the design is a little bit different. It's pointed on two ends. That allows you to iron your clothes without having to lift up the iron to turn it to iron in the other direction. It also has asbestos or concrete or some other material, lightweight material in the middle that absorbs heat, but it's not as heavy as a solid cast iron. Later on in the 30s, the Coleman Manufacturing Company, famous for lanterns, decided to develop a gasoline-powered iron. This is the Model B. The Model A was interesting because the little pint fuel cylinder sometimes popped off, but it was only a pint of gasoline in your house, so it's not too bad. But the Model B became so popular, it lasted through the mid-40s. And the mid-40s is important because that's the time when the rural electrification was completely in progress. So the entire nation was being electrified. Gas was coming to the house, electricity was coming to the house. You can have more modern, more convenient appliances. We talked about the sad iron. A more efficient type of iron was the charcoal box iron. You'd put charcoal in the iron. It stayed hotter longer, was lighter than the iron, except it produced more smoke and fumes. So people went for the convenience over the efficiency. A better iron, in terms of ironing, but it provided some side effects that people didn't like. Moving on, we go to the vacuum cleaners, only because they're nice and attractive, and they show a good transition from the manual type of vacuum where you'd actually lift up the handle, and the pumping action would cause the dirt and dust to be sucked up through the bottom into the dust canister, to the modern, to the more forward-designed Electrolux from 1937, and later on the door-to-door salesman version of the Kirby upright vacuum cleaner. If you look around over here, we have some. We wanted to give an impression of home delivery that was available in the 40s and 50s with milk. But milk wasn't the only thing that was delivered. We had newspapers and groceries and food and bread and ice and coal. The doctor even came for home delivery. And around the middle 60s, when things became easier to get in the supermarkets, then home delivery started to fade. Until 1997 when Amazon was formed. And now we got Amazon delivering everything that used to come, and Instacart will bring your groceries to you. Over here we have one of Thomas Alva Edison's least acknowledged inventions. It's not the amber cylinder, it's not the phonograph, it's the liner notes. In 1912, Thomas Edison started placing liner notes in his cylinder cases for two reasons. One, it was to provide some more education, some more information about the song that was on the cylinder, and to advertise other songs available in his catalog, and also to raise the price of the cylinder from 35 cents to 50 cents. So it was a marketing ploy to drive sales. It didn't work because a few years later it was discontinued, but the price didn't go down. So the price stayed up. Another advertising marketing scheme, known in marketing here, the Silvertone Silver Jubilee radio from 1942. Silvertone was formed in 1916. The silver anniversary is 25 years. This is 26 years. So marketing can't even get the dates right. Home delivery, the RJ Review Journal. Lots of people were interested in, everyone had a paper out during the 40s, 50s, 60s. But now you can't, you get your news online with your news aggregated website on your cell phone. Behind here we have the Turbinator, which were very common machines in beauty salons throughout America. This is the T100. It's the first of the 15 models of hair dryer that Turbinator made. This is a freestanding unit. The 15th variation includes looks like a captain's chair from Starship Enterprise with that little hair dryer coming out the back, where it was all-in-one device. This one, the salon had to provide its own chair. All the latest conveniences, variable heat and cooling settings, even a reading lamp so that you could read the magazine while you're waiting for your hair to dry. And later on in their later life, they became known as salon model. The Turbinator name changed to salon. And they're still being made and used mostly now in Canada. One other thing we wanted to talk about for the changing in technology is the telephones. We have the first telephone that included the receiver and the handset in one unit. And then the very popular 3-coin payphone, which there's no phone booths anymore, so you're not going to see those in any split museums. Along with them, we have the 1949 telephone directory and the 1959 telephone directory for Las Vegas. So you can see the size of the community based on the telephone book. Around the 80s, when the last books were made, they were 4 or 5 inches thick for the white pages and another 3 or 4 inches for the yellow pages. So we went from a community of 50,000 to more than 2 million. And also, this talks about change because the telephone succeeded the telegraph. The telegraph came in 1840s, the first telephone in 1870s. The telephone tended to, was more convenient than the telegraph, and it replaced the telegraph even though it used the same telegraph lines and telegraph poles as the telegraph. But pretty soon the telegraph wasn't around anymore, and by 1900 the phone was dominant. 1950 technology was changing, and we lost the telephone operators because of technology and direct dial. In the 1970s, the first mobile phones started showing up. 1980s, the first generation of analog broadcasting came around. 10 years later, the 90s, was the 2G second generation, then came 3G, 4G, and 5G. And if you have a cell phone now, it's time to replace it because it's not going to work unless you have 5G technology. Those are some of the highlights of this exhibit. We have like 800 square feet to take a look at. And so you're on your own now to wander around and take a look at your own.
Thank you.
Thank you.